Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me in today's presentation, Chapter 3, Processes and Domains of the Project Management Professional Exam Certification Preparations. My name is Michel Zibara, and without further ado, I'm gonna take you through that presentation. In our presentation today, we are going to discuss mainly the project management process groups, the examination content outline, ECO domains, roles of a project manager during project management process groups, project lifecycle, and the development lifecycle. We have 5 process groups in the PMP framework. The first one is initiation, second is planning, the third is execution, the fourth is monitoring and controlling, and number 5 is project closing. You should know these 5 process groups and what happens in each of these 5 process groups. Before we start discussing them, I want to note that these process groups are sequential by the way I listed them, are in order: initiation, planning, execution, controlling and monitoring, and closing. However, it's important to know that they are also iterative. That means if I am in the execution phase and a project change or a request was raised and assessed and authorized and approved, then there is an arrow that goes from the execution back to the planning to update the plans with that change that has been approved. So yes, and that can happen backward from the execution to the planning, and sometimes from the execution to the initiation in rare cases when the project is terminated, for instance, and also from controlling and monitoring back to execution and back to the planning, and sometimes from closing back to the execution and control and monitoring. It's very important to know that control and monitoring happens throughout initiation, planning, execution, and closing. So control and monitoring covers all the other 4 groups. Okay, I hope that is clear for everyone. During initiation, now, what happens during the initiation? First of all, the project manager is selected during the initiation. The project manager is responsible to determine the company culture and existing systems and uncover previous agreements and processes, procedures, and historical information within the organization. Why is that important? Because if I'm starting a project, there is a chance that this project or a similar project within the organization has been implemented, or even outside the organization has been implemented, and some lessons learned and templates and documents have been gathered and stored in a repository or a knowledge base. I can use these templates to build upon them rather than starting the work from scratch. That's the importance. So collecting processes, procedures, and historical information is very important. Divide large projects into phases or smaller projects. That is also very important. I'm going to discuss that more. Let me a little bit elaborate on that point. So a lot of people, they confuse between life cycle approaches and what are the phases of the project or the stages of the project, or what is a phase gate, what is a stage gate. You know, all these life cycle approaches, change driven, plan driven, waterfall. Okay, so it's very simple. I'm going to describe it now, and everybody will, by the end of this presentation, understand that point very clearly and no longer confuse it. Right? So first of all, PMP test candidates based on them being project managers executing mega projects, large projects. When we speak of large projects, we speak of a project that has a feasibility phase or stage, a research and feasibility stage, initiation phase, planning phase, production phase, commissioning phase, testing phase, startup phase, turnover into operation, and transition phase into operations. So this is when we speak about a large project. And each of these phases or stages, they have what is called by the end of that phase something called stage gate or phase gate. Once the phase gate or stage gate has been completed and accomplished, then the second phase of the project starts. In each and every phase or stage of the project, which I've mentioned now, okay, research, design, building, testing, production, commissioning, up to startup and turnover into operations. The 5 process groups, which are initiation, planning, execution, control and monitoring, and closing, can happen in each or will definitely happen from experience in each of these phases because it is a mega project, it's a large project. Okay, so now we know what is phase or stage in large projects. We know the process groups, they can be implemented in each phase. We know that another subsequent phase will not start unless the stage gate of that phase has been achieved. So that is crystal clear now to us. Now, when we come and say development project life cycle or life cycle development life cycle of the project, we have discussed that before. We have what is called by plan driven or traditional or waterfall or the legacy life cycle. That means that the scope is very clear and defined upfront, and it's well articulated and documented, and I know what I am delivering upfront. So that is when we speak about the predictive life cycle approach or its synonyms. When we speak about the agile, we speak of change driven, adaptive, agile. In that type of life cycle approach, I deliver, as I said also before, I deliver the project. There is a release planning. Every release has a set of iterations or sprints. Every sprint or iteration is 2 to 4 weeks. By the end of every iteration or sprint, there is a retrospective to assess what has been done right, it's like a lessons learned, but that's agile terminology. And and in agile, I'm delivering a minimal viable product, a working solution. I'm giving the organization or my customer or my key stakeholders the minimum skeleton working solution in the first release, and in subsequent releases I am delivering more features of that working solution to the business. So the aim of that is I would generate profit and benefit to the organization as early as possible, and I will demonstrate a working solution to the customer, which or the stakeholders that they can start using it without its full-blown functionalities. Now that is clear now for everybody, and that is, I think I've mixed a little bit in the content, but I found that this opportunity is good to discuss that and make it clear. Right, and then the second, another activity performed in initiation, we said divide large projects into phases or small projects. That's clear. We've discussed a lot about it. Understand the business case. Every project needs to achieve a target. Every project is initiated and created for a certain reason. As a project manager, it is very important to understand the business case and the context of that project. How will it help the business? Why was it created? What objectives is it going to accomplish? So this is very key to understand during the initiation. Uncover initial requirements, assumptions, risk, constraints, and existing agreements, of course, and you can find them in the business case at a very high level. However, subsequent details and further analysis happens in the planning regarding these elements. And assess project and product feasibility within the given constraints. Okay, project and product feasibility within the given constraints. Create measurable objectives and success criteria. That starts at a very high level in the initiation. In the planning, it will be detailed more. Develop project charter. Without a project charter, the project is not authorized to start. So the key activity in the initiation process is to develop the project charter, where a project manager is appointed within that project charter, and that project charter has to be approved by the sponsor, okay, in order to authorize the project. That's very important in initiation. Identify stakeholders and determine their expectations, interest, influence, and impact, of course, in initiation. Request changes. Changes gets requested in initiation. Develop assumption log and stakeholder register. Planning. After completing, as I said, after completion of the initiation phase, or process group, planning process group starts. Please be careful that what I am going to list now from activities, they should be followed in order. So as a project manager, in the planning process, by the PMP framework and by the PMP book, that order need to be followed. That order of activities need to be followed. And it's very important to note that this order of activities is also iterative, not only sequential, but also iterative, and I'm going to discuss that now. The first step is determine development approach, life cycle, and how you plan for each knowledge area. No one can now, if I ask the question, what is a development or life cycle approach? Everybody knows. Change driven, predictive, and their synonyms, or hybrid. Okay, hybrid is a mixture between the two. Okay, and how, as a project manager, I will plan for each knowledge area. When we say knowledge areas, okay, when we say knowledge area in project management, we speak of scope management plan, we speak of cost management plan, quality management plan, staffing management plan, risk management plan, procurement management plan, stakeholder management plan, communication management plan, okay, configuration management plan, change management plan. All these plans are knowledge areas. Every plan is a knowledge area, and we are going to discuss about it. So in planning, the project manager starts to determine and identify how he will plan for each knowledge areas. Please read word by word how he will plan for each of what I have listed now from knowledge areas. Second step in planning, define and prioritize requirements. Requirements collected from stakeholders, from customers, from business stakeholders, all sorts of stakeholders are defined, articulated, and prioritized during planning. Create the project scope statement. I know what I'm going to deliver. That's the outcome of the scope. So it's a scope statement, project scope statement, sorry. I'm rushing because I want to finish within a short duration. Assess what to purchase and create procurement documents. So after I generate the project scope statement, it gets clear to me at a very high level. Definitely there will be changes, but it gets clear to me what I'm going to purchase and an initial estimate of how much it's going to cost and what sort of procurement documents I'm going to generate. Then after that, the project manager determines the planning team, then create the work breakdown structure and work breakdown WBS dictionary up to the by performing decomposition up to the smallest work package. After that, he or she create the activity list. We're going to discuss all of them in details. Just now know the order and get a little bit familiar with the name. The network diagram. Estimate resource requirements, how many resources, what are the requirements of the resources estimated. Estimate the activity duration and costs, very clear. Determine the critical path, the float, and all. We're going to discuss critical path in further slides. Develop the schedule. After the schedule, develop the budget. After that, determine the quality standards, processes, and metrics. Determine the team charter and all roles and responsibility, and define the roles and the responsibilities of the team. Plan communication and stakeholder engagement. Perform risk identification, qualitative, quantitative risk analysis, and risk response planning, go back iterations. This is very important. Go back iteration. So after I perform the risk identification and I define the risks and I uncover the known risks and I perform the qualitative and quantitative risk assessment, I take that risk management plan and I evaluate it, and then I go back in the planning, starting from the procurement documents and what I assess to purchase, and see what was the difference. What did this change? What did these risks change to the other elements of my planning? So I go back and I update, modify, assess what did the risk management plan, how did it affect other elements of my plan. After that, as you can see, finalize procurement strategy and documents, because I can only finalize procurement strategy and documents after I finish my risk assessment. That's very important. So then that's why I said in the procurement strategy and documents, it's at a very high level after defining the scope statement. Here it is final. Then after that, create change and configuration management plan. Of course, without a change management plan, any change request will get approved or get rejected. We will end up having unsatisfied customers, or we will end up saying yes to every change and not being able to complete the project on time and within budget and up to the quality expected, up to the customer satisfaction. Of course, all these constraints. Finalize all management plans. That's after the configuration and change management plan. Develop realistic and sufficient project management plan and baseline, performance measurement baseline. Of course, the project management plan need to be realistic and need to be sufficient and need to be convincing for the sponsor to sign it off. Without the sponsor signing off a project management plan, the work cannot be executed. That is key element in the planning process group. And gaining the formal approval of the sponsor for the plan is very necessary. Without this, it's a big mistake that is being ignored or omitted by the project manager. It's a false step, let me put it this way. Then after that, hold the kickoff meeting, and after the kickoff meeting, definitely changes can get requested. After kickoff meeting, changes gets requested, okay? And then a final consolidated plan gets approved. Executing process group. Execute work according to the PM. Once I have the project approved, final project management plan, that is the last step in planning. I start execution, the execution process group. I start executing the work as per the project management plan. I produce, or the team produce, product deliverable, or what's called product scope. I, as a project manager, gather work performance data. Work performance data is, for instance, I have this resource, he works 10 hours a day and he achieves 10% of the work. So it's like data collected and gathered to be able to base upon it other work performance information and reports to of the project. Request changes in execution. I can still request changes, of course. Implement only approved changes, of course, after executing the integrated control change, ICC. Continuously improve, perform progressive elaboration, iterate and reiterate and reiterate and improve and update. Follow the process in execution. Follow the planned process and the organization processes. Determine whether quality plan and processes are correct and effective. Acquire final team and physical resources. Manage the people. Evaluate team and individual performance. Provide training. See where there is a gap. If they need training, the team need training. Raise that to the management. Hold team building activities. Give recognitions and rewards. Use issue logs and facilitate conflict resolution. All of this takes place in execution. Not only this, but the project manager knows when the work is complete. He or she has to release the resources from the project. Send and receive information and solicit feedback. Of course, communication is 90% of the project management, and the project manager spends 90% of his time communicating on the project and soliciting feedback from key stakeholders and from the customers, external and internal. Report on project performance, facilitate stakeholders' engagement and manage expectations, hold meetings, evaluate sellers, negotiate and contract with sellers. So negotiating and contracting with sellers happen in the execution process group, not in the planning, not in the control and monitoring. Please note that point, it's very important. A lot of people miss that point on the exam. Use and share project knowledge, execute contingency plans, update project management plan and project documents. Monitoring and controlling process group. That's the process group number 5, which we said monitoring and controlling happens in initiation, in planning, in execution, and in closing. Keep that also, it's a very important note for the exam. Take actions to monitor and control the project. Okay, it's all about controlling and monitoring. Measuring performance against the performance measurement baseline. Have a baseline set in the project planning and executing, and I want to measure against that performance measurement baseline. How much I'm achieving in terms of that baseline that I have set. If I am talking about schedule, if I'm talking about risks, if I'm talking about cost, if I'm talking, so it's all measurement against the performance measurement baseline. How am I doing against that set baseline? Measure performance against other metrics in the project management plan, not only that performance measurement baseline. It's always compare against and measure against and determine how much variance. Okay, analyze and evaluate data and performance, of course. Determine determine if variances warrant a corrective or other change requests, of course. Influence factors that cause change. Request changes, perform integrated change control, ICC. That is, assess the change, study the change, analyze it, raise it to the steering committee. When we say study and assess it, you are assessing it against, as a project manager, against the your schedule that you have set and you are accountable for, against the cost or the budget that has been allocated to you, and you are also accountable to complete that project within that budget. So any change might incur delays to the schedule, might incur budget overruns. So not only that, but can induce risks and can induce resources issues and can induce quality problems and reworks on the project. So it's very important to assess as a project manager and know very well the integrated change control process and execute it, adhere to it, and say no when you have to say no. As a project manager, you have to say no sometimes if you are not given, or if you do not, if you find out that this change is going to affect your project and you haven't been given additional budget or additional time to complete your schedule. Okay, so after performing ICC, you have to go back, as we said, in control and monitoring. It's not only sequential by you can go back, or you have to go back to planning, update the plans with document if the change has been approved, document it in your plans. If it has been rejected, also document the reason for the rejection, and if it has been deferred, also document it and document the reason for it being deferred. Okay, it could be a nice to have change, not a mandatory change. That's one of the reasons. Approve or reject changes. As we said, after you perform ICC, you approve or reject, or the steering committee or the change control board will approve or reject changes. Update PM plan and project documents. Inform stakeholders of all the change request results. We've discussed all these things, that's why I'm running quickly through them. Monitor stakeholder engagement, confirm configuration compliance, create forecasts, gain customers' acceptance of interim deliverables, perform quality control, perform risk reviews, reassessments and audits, manage reserves, contingency and cost reserves, risk reserves also, manage, evaluate and close procurements, evaluate use of physical resources. Closing process group, and that is the number 5 and the last process group in project management or PMP. Confirm work is done. Me as a project manager, I have to confirm work is done to requirements. Complete the final procurement closure, closing procurements, gain final acceptance of the product, get the sign off, that's very important. Complete financial closure, hand off completed products, solicit customers' feedback about the project. Is the customer happy? Is he satisfied? He or she satisfied? Is the group that is using that project, or once it's turned over into operations, are they maximizing the use of it? Are there any defects, any problems? Very important that the project manager doesn't stop at the closing phase, but even keep an eye during the operation, during the initial stage, when the customer or the stakeholders are using that project in operations. Complete the final performance reporting, index and archive records, gather final lessons learned, and update knowledge bases. With that, we have reached our final slide. I hope that this presentation was informative. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. If you like that presentation, please subscribe to that channel, hit the like button, share it with a friend that is preparing for PMP, and do not forget to hit the bell icon so you will get a notification every time I post a new presentation. It's not going to stop here. You guys, if you reach to that presentation, you have a will, you have a strong will, and you have decided to start your PMP. So good luck for you, and we will carry on up until the final chapter, and I hope I will help within a small percentage, let me put it that way. I will help you succeed with your PMP preparations and passing your exam. Thank you so much, and take care, and see you in the next presentation.